was it like to live under the Jim Crow laws and segregation?
A little difficult to explain, but think about a fish. A fish does not know it's in water. It's the world of the fish. Jim Crow laws and segregation were the world that I grew up in until I was 20, 22 years old. When I was your age in 1949, it was a world where everybody conspired is not too strong a word, conspired to accept it. Jim Crow laws meant colored-only water fountains, white-only water fountains. It meant colored people, today called black people, rode in the front of in the back of the bus, and white people rode in the front. Movie audiences, the white people sat on the main floor, the black people went upstairs into the balcony. Restrooms were separated. Restaurants did not serve black folks. Hotels would not rent rooms to them. It was awful when one thinks about it in 2013 or 2065 for that matter, but it's just the way life was down there then. So it was not that strange. Our two closest neighbors we lived out in the country, so our neighbors were way out. You know, they didn't live in our back pocket and we didn't live in theirs. Our closest neighbors were an elderly black family that lived about a quarter mile behind us. And the other neighbor was a black family with half a dozen children who lived about a half mile to the right of us. And we all got along great. You know, my dad would look after the older black folks up behind us, make sure they had food or anything they needed, medicine, trip to the doctor since they didn't have a car. My brother's sister and I played with the black kids from next door, as it were, even though it was half a city block or a city block or longer away, until dinner time. And then we'd go in our house and have supper, and they would go home to their house and have supper. We never really socialized. I didn't go to their house. They didn't come to our house. So it was just a different world.
How fast did news spread?
News spread very quickly. There was enormous press coverage of the whole civil rights movement, which really started in about 1960 when I would have been 22. I started a little bit earlier in the late 50s when the Supreme Court said that the segregation in the schools had to end in 1954. They handed down this ruling, and it made most of the South just angry as hell, frankly. So it started there and was in full speed by 1960 when most people had a television set and everybody had radios, newspapers, magazines. Every newspaper in the country covered it with photographs and news stories. The Atlanta Journal and Constitution in Atlanta, the New York Times, any paper you can think of any note in the country, all the news channels, which there were only 3 then, you have to remember, ABC, NBC, and CBS. But every night there would be a story on it.
What is living in the South at the time? Did you think nonviolence would work?
Yes, I think I did. I was embarrassingly detached from the civil rights movement until very late in the 60s when it got to include the resistance to the Vietnam War. But nonviolence had worked for Mahatma Gandhi, is it? Mm-hmm. Certainly Gandhi in India, God, I don't know when, early 1900s, when this tiny little man in India said, we don't want the British here anymore in our country and they should get out. And he staged these mass protests where people would literally sit down in front of charging horses and soldiers with sabers come swishing in on them. And Martin Luther King Jr. was a great, great disciple of Gandhi's. And if you think about it, it takes two people to fight. And if one of them won't fight, the other one's just standing there flailing his arms and looking like a jackass. So that the other thing is that the person who wants to fight and is angry and is yelling and screaming and using water hoses and dogs and guns on people who don't do anything but sit there, they look foolish. They look crazy. So the people who are more moderate and who are not necessarily lined up with one side or the other tend to take the side of those people who are just sitting there and saying, no, we're not going to go away. You can do what you'd like to us. You can put us in jail. You can squirt us with fire hoses. You can set dogs on us. But in the end, you're going to lose because we're not going to go away.
What if anything... What, if anything, did you do to support the equal rights movement?
Embarrassingly little. The whole 1960s for me was a period, personally, of 2 years in the Navy, 1 year of school, and 5th year of school at architecture school. I worked as an architect, and then I started working in the theater, so I was changing careers. I was too selfish, personally. And again, I didn't get involved in demonstrations until the late 60s and early 70s, when by then it was mainly a protest against Vietnam.
That's all I have.
All right.
Anything else you want to add?
Huh?
Anything else you want to add? Anything else you want to add?
I don't think so. I don't know. I don't really know what it would be.
Oh, tell the story about when you and your family moved into the new house and the nice family next door to you brought dinner for your mom.
Oh, yeah. Going back to the black elderly family who lived behind us, when we moved in out there in 1943 it would have been, during the middle of the Second World War, the black family made and brought dinner to us because they knew my mother wouldn't have time to cook because we were unpacking, and you know what it's like to move into a house. You've been there. But it was that kind of really good relationship. And my dad and my family, my mother and my father, would not let us utter the N-word, which was totally used by everybody at the time in the South. And I've had my head popped more than once. Pow! For letting that word come through my lips. And we were told and taught to respect everybody. People are people. And the color of their skin doesn't matter at all. And I've been taught that since I was younger than you are, even. So it's a good lesson. Real good lesson in life. Whether people are rich or poor, or not too bright, or very bright, essentially they're just people. And we're more